I was so inspired over the entire last week by the miracles that were happening every day with how Israel was destroying and destroying and destroying in Syria with like not anyone stopping them. It was unbelievable. And it really made me feel, wow, are we living in miraculous times? We are living in crazy miraculous times. There's so much going on. And what happens is things happen and they're cool, they're exciting, they're amazing. And then we forget and something else happens and we get excited about that and then we move on and we stop thinking about it. And I felt like that's been this whole year. Like God keeps in unbelievable ways making, I don't know, making the IDF look like a superhuman army, which it's not. It's an army of humans. I don't know if Jews are humans, it's an army of humans. If Jews aren't human, it's an army of Jews. But giving them such unbelievable success, giving them such unbelievable power again and again and again. So I really wanted to recap. And I haven't been, I guess it would have been smart if every time I saw another miracle, I wrote it down, jotted it. I jot down my miracles. I should have jotted down Israel's miracles, but I didn't. So this is just, I guess, called the highlights. What a year later, now we're in December, and I'm thinking from last October until now, we're talking about 15 months of so many things that were the hand of God again and again and again and again in such an overt way that I felt it's remiss not to stop and pause and reflect and say thank you. And then maybe say, and where is this leading to? So I was thinking of it like Hamas. Hamas now is destroyed. The reality is they're destroyed. There's literally just sole fugitive terrorists left that they still have to wipe away, but just nothing of nothing. There's no one area we can say, well, just that brigade, that commando unit, like nothing. If they can fire a missile, they celebrate even though the missile goes into the sea because it was such an unbelievable thing that they could fire a missile. That's what they've come to. If you think back over the year, and again, this is just what I'm remembering, and anyone can feel free to add what I forget that they remember because I'm sure I forgot many more than I remember, but just remembering some of the things when the political head of Hamas was in Iran, somehow, and nobody could figure out how, Israel killed him. And the rumors were flying and flying how Israel killed him, but nobody ever could figure it out. Because how did Israel kill him? He's in this very safe, very protected place in a suburb of Iran for very high influential political leaders. Not a place like, how did they do it? They planted a bomb, an explosive in his room, and how did they know where his room was? And is that what they did? Till nobody knows. It just felt so miraculous. That was the same week when they killed one of the top leaders of Hezbollah, literally within the same 24 hours. But Sinwar, how Sinwar was killed. Everyone said he was untouchable. It's so interesting because here these heads of the terrorist groups, whatever those groups are, they all do the same thing. They all send their people on death missions and celebrate death and die for Allah, die for the cause, die for the cause. They preach to all their followers, and somehow they themselves are very protective of their own lives. So every one of these heads that have been taken down, these are people that are not supposed to be taken down, and they don't want to be taken down, and they very much protect their own lives. He did not own a cell phone. He did not have any electronics on him. He didn't want to be tracked on any level. He didn't know about the exploding beepers or walkie-talkies, but no level could they track him. The only way he communicated with his own people was through a human courier. He was surrounded by very select guards. He was surrounded by a shield of humans, captives. They said at one point that he always had captives right nearby, that if anyone would try to get him, they'd have to get through them first. He was deep in the tunnels on October 6th. Before their October 7th attack, he and his family, as we now have footage, went into the tunnels for protection. So he seemed untouchable. So how did he die? We know he got killed. How did he die? He died like the most common, insignificant terrorist. He died like a piece of nothing. One of the men in the group that took him down, this is how he explains what happened. He says that they came into this area. This was a relatively novice group. These were all people that had enlisted after October 7th. It was a religious group. So it's a group that were all religious that had enlisted after October 7th. So none of these elite, paratroopers of the Israeli army. A very simple group. And they were given this little area in Gaza to watch. And the group that was there watching before them told them it's really calm, like nothing's happening here, like don't worry. Great. So they're watching and their drones saw some terrorists. Okay, terrorists were going into a building. We have to go after them. So they go to try to kill the terrorists, try to eliminate them. And the way the terrorists have gotten into a certain building, they were like, let's go to the building next door. Many of the buildings, of course, at this point are not standing in Gaza, but these buildings were. Let's go to the building next door. We'll go to the second story, and from there we'll be able to shoot into this building and get the terrorists. That was their plan. Okay. So they go into what they thought was the empty building next door, and they're going up the steps to get to the second floor to have that height superiority to shoot down on the terrorists. And suddenly they see it's not an empty building, and there's some terrorist on the second floor. And they're trying to go up, and he's shooting down at them, and he had some, I don't know what they were, explosives that he was throwing down at them. So, all right, we got to eliminate him to get to our goal. So they're fighting. It took 2 hours. After 2 hours, they eliminated that terrorist, and they go to their position. The whole goal was to get to this position. They didn't even think about the terrorists. They got to their position, and it took them a long time. I think it might have even taken 2 days till they eliminated those terrorists they saw in the next building. But they did it after 2 days. After the elimination, they went and they examined the terrorists that they killed. I don't know why. They don't even know why they examined them so closely. And they saw on one, like some paperwork that made them think, I don't remember what it was. We think he's important. So they took all the paperwork and they sent it to the intelligence unit of the IDF. And when they sent this paperwork to the intelligence unit, they said, ooh, him. He is always, according to our intelligence, he's very close to Sinwar. So if you eliminated him, Sinwar might be in the area. Now they had already heard before they came that this might be the area that Sinwar's in, because when those 6 hostages were shot and Israel came, the Israeli army was there to, took them and did a lot of examination in that area, they said they saw Sinwar's DNA all over the area. All over the area where these 6 hostages, Rahman al-Islam, were shot. So they had this, maybe Sinwar's here, who knows, like whatever that means. And now they were told this person, he is important and he's very close to Sinwar. Meaning he's so close that if you found him, maybe Sinwar's around. And then they said, oh, remember that other terrorist we got like 2 days ago? We never really looked at him. We were focused on getting this group down. Let's go check him out. So they went to that terrorist that they had killed 2 days before, and they looked at him and they're like, oh my, this is Sinwar. We weren't even paying attention. We were getting rid of him to get to this place to knock them down. We got rid of Sinwar. And I thought, look what God did. A group of recruits, a group of religious recruits, simple group, killed him without even paying attention, so to speak. Killed him meaning just to focusing on going somewhere else. Only examined his body 2 days later because of someone else's body. He died such a common death. So unimportant. I think God was just making so strongly the case. Not only could he get rid of Sinwar, but he didn't even have to make him like he was a big deal. He wasn't. He was a very small deal. It was just so amazing. I know I shared here recently in terms of 2 of the times when Israel were able to rescue hostages. If you remember, I said how they rescued the girl soldier because after her mother did the challah bake for her and her uncle kept Shabbos for her and a friend brought her a letter in Sefer Torah, as she's sitting there, there's only one terrorist with her, and he fell asleep. And she grabbed his phone. And she texted her mother, pinned her location. And that was how the IDF was able to get her, because they knew her location from that text she sent her mother. Like, that's insane. Insane she was alone with one. Insane he fell asleep. Insane she got his phone. Insane she knew his code or got past it. Insane she had the presence of mind to send her mother her location pinned. I mean, I would never have thought of that. Like, just like the hand of God. And in the beginning, the two women, one from Evanston, who they released without Israel give them anything. Like, why? What was going on? When they rescued the two Argentinians, and the army involved said that if this was a script in a movie, it would be rejected. It's too implausible. How did they do it? It just happened. I shared recently with that one woman and three men that when just before the operation, they found out that where the woman was, instead of three terrorists, a fourth joined. And they were like, forget it, we can't rescue her. We plotted this whole thing out strategically with three. We can't rescue her with four. And then they did. And they went for it anyway. And smooth, easy. He said rescuing the three men was much, much more complicated. I mean, these are just examples I'm remembering. Obviously, there were far, far, far more. But just thinking over a year of the loss of life, I mean, any Jew that dies, any Jew that's killed, any Jew that's wounded is horrible. But the loss of life compared to what was predicted to be the loss of life in this, as they call it, urban warfare. Urban warfare is the most difficult war to fight because you're fighting against an enemy you don't see, against an enemy that just, goes back into the buildings or the alleyways, that knows this territory and you don't, that could just blend in with the civilian population. The loss of life that was projected versus the loss of life that happened, and also on the side of the Gazans, how the number of casualties, not what, some media likes to project, but the reality of the numbers is so low compared to what normally is in this type of warfare. Again, it was just hand of God, hand of God, hand of God. Now, again, I'm sure I forgot much more than I remembered. But just what I remembered was so strong and so empowering. Look at the hand of God so revealed. That was with Hamas. Hezbollah is 10 times larger than Hamas. 10 times, literally, much more than 10 times, in terms of their armament, in terms of their number of soldiers, of terrorists. Much, much, much larger. Hamas is this, they had about, I think, originally like 3,000 terrorists, something like that, 3,000 to 5,000. Hamas, I think, officially had like 100,000. Like, insane number more. I'm saying, sorry, Hezbollah had like 100,000. Hamas had like 3,000 to 5,000. Insane the number differences. Maybe my numbers are a little off because I'm not remembering precisely, but insane more. And miracle after miracle after miracle. I think the miracles here are actually even more overt. The first miracle that people don't really talk about or think about as a miracle, was such a miracle, is that Hezbollah didn't attack on October 7th. I think they were supposed to. It seems it was coordinated. These are part of Iran's, as they call it, axis of resistance. They were supposed to be working together. But that first day, that first horrific, horrific day, Hezbollah didn't do anything. Which meant for that first day, the entire army, the entire IDF, was able to be focused on the south. October 8th, Hezbollah joined. But that one day difference, which just could be like, okay, big deal, but it was very strategic, and it made no sense. Like, obviously they were planning on joining. They did join. Obviously, strategically, militarily, it should have been boom at the same time. And what the army found, when the army did start going into the tunnels of Hezbollah that are far more extensive than the tunnels that Hamas had, is that Hezbollah had planned their own version of an October 7th, but so much greater. So much greater that it was like, I mean, I don't know if it's right to use such an expression, but the expression that they were saying was October 7th would have looked like a picnic in the park compared to what Hezbollah was planning on doing, with so much more trucks ready, with so much more armament ready, with so much more plans. They literally saw maps of how they were going to go into the whole north and do the same massacres and kidnapping and murdering and all the barbaric things that were done in the south. And on October 7th, Hezbollah was planning much, much larger. And God didn't happen at all. You know, I have much more to say, but I've been talking a long time. Anybody's response to this? Have you been feeling this, noticing this, thinking about this?
Culminated when Syria with Assad failed. It's such a culmination because now Hezbollah and Hamas don't have a supplier. Iran can't supply and fortify them. And the Al-Qaeda group that captured Syria is enemies with Hezbollah. So that's good for Israel. And Cyril, on another note, Mount Hermon Israelis, Jewish people went to Mount Hermon after Assad fell and were able to say prayers there. It's a big significance also, isn't it?
Huge. I'm going to get this whole class was stimulated by what happened in Syria. That's what made me feel the enormities of these miracles and stop, look at them, look at the totality of them and say thank you. They're unbelievable. Yes, unbelievable. What happened in Syria to me was, in a sense, the most dramatic, clear revelation of the hand of God. Though this all was like a piece, but that was like such neon colors, so beyond.
Cyril, I want to ask you something. Do you remember when it just started, when in beginning, maybe months after October 7 last year, you told us that you learned from your husband that he read something very interesting in Gemara, and everything what he read, you felt like this is exactly what's going on, and there was talking about how far Jewish Israel will go. So I want you to remind us this piece, because is it something where we are now with Syria? Was it that area?
So that's such a good question. Yes, so this is based on, yes, what you're remembering correctly. This is what's based on, it's based in the Gemara, like you said, and it's based on the prophecies of Isaiah. And basically it's speaking of how the destruction of Gaza,
Yes.
and connecting this to the conquering of the lands on the other side of the Jordan, which definitely includes Syria. Syria is only a part, of course, of the other side of the Jordan, but yes, definitely 100%. And yes, that was this amazing, yes, to me, very, very, very messianic.
Right. And at that time when you were telling this, it was like, wow, could it be? Could it be at the time? How could it be? So that's a big miracle. As soon as I saw Lebanon and Syria going down, it felt like that's what was written there.
After Syria fell, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, he was for 13 years in a cave, very holy. He and his son, they had to flee the Romans, and literally they lived in a cave for 13 years, up to their necks in sand, eating buxar, and they lived a miraculous life. At one point, he heard an angel saying outside the cave, he was in the cave, he heard an angel outside the cave speaking of there'll be the destruction of, in Hebrew, Damascus, and from the destruction of Damascus, then will come the redemption. And when the way this angel referred to the leader of Damascus, it's basically the same numerical value as Assad's name.
Wow.
So it made like a lot of like, whoa, connections between this destruction and redemption. I was focusing on Hamas just as the starting point, as our attention moved over the year, and then Hezbollah, where it's, again, the miracle, as I'm saying, it's a quiet miracle, because when something doesn't happen, you don't always notice to say, thank you, God, that they did not attack. But then you think, why didn't they attack? The only logical military sense to attack at the same time from two different directions. And for some reason, God didn't let they attacked on October 8th. as we said, their plans for their version of October 7th, that was, you shouldn't even talk about what they were planning, shouldn't even talk about what they had ready that all got destroyed, that never was used against us. How their entire leadership was taken down. As I said, within 24 hours of when they mysteriously, Israel somehow managed to take down the political head of Hamas in Iran, within 24 hours, they also took down one of the highest ranking people in Hezbollah. Again, a person that doesn't have a cell phone, it has no way of anyone knowing where he is, had, I don't know how many $1 million bounty of the American government on his head. You know, they made a joke that like Israel in like 2 weeks, you know, took down more people with American head bounties than America did in like 30 years. How did they do it? How did they know where he was? How did they find him? How did they know exactly which building? They went and destroyed exactly one building where he was in. How? We don't know. Within 24 hours of getting the president, not the president, the political head of Hamas was in Iran. Nasrallah was considered untouchable. Far huger than Sinwar. Far more untouchable. Hezbollah is far bigger than Hamas. And guess what? If God wants, no one's untouchable. So then they made a replacement for Nasrallah, and Israel eliminated him. And then they made a replacement for that replacement, and Israel eliminated him. What Israel did with the beepers and the walkie-talkies and the pagers, the whole concept behind it, how they had made some dummy company that Hezbollah bought their pagers from, and they made the company, they made the pagers or walkie-talkies and beepers in such a way that obviously they were going to be scanned. They had to go through metal detectors. But nothing was revealed. How did they do that? Again, it's humans. It's Jews. They don't have superpowers. Do they have superpowers? What's God doing here? I heard, I don't know if it's true, but one of the many things I heard was that Israel had 3 different dummy companies that were all competing for the Hezbollah bid. Meaning they were like, it's fine. We have this all set up. We have this all planned out. You know, when the moment we need it, we know exactly how to take them down. The morning, Sunday morning, October 25th, I remember this very well because my daughter was supposed to fly and did fly the next day. And when it happened, I'm like, okay, she's not going to fly. For sure, the airport's not going to have anyone flying now, but it's worth it. By us, it was Saturday night. So I saw the Saturday night. It was Sunday morning. It was right after Shabbos was over. Sunday morning, Hezbollah had planned a massive attack on Israel. Until then, most of the attacks were in the north, which of course doesn't mean it's insignificant, but the north is not as populated. Now they were sending longer range missiles to go for central Israel, to go for the highest population area of Israel. In many different places, they had coordinated that they were all going to leave at 7 a.m. August 25th. At 6:45 a.m. August 25th, the Israeli Air Force came and bombed every one of those UAVs and drones and missiles. Not one of them flew. Not one of them. What's going on? How does Israel know? How do they know where they are? How do they... 15 minutes! They did it so precisely, maybe because they needed to make sure, you know, the only thing I could understand was that they wanted the missiles and UAVs and drones ready to go so they'd be easier to get them and destroy them. How is God giving them all this precise information of everything they're doing, exactly where every UAV and drone and missile are, and exactly the time of the attack, and it was like, I remember when it was happening. I was like, again, I forgot far more than I remember. But I remember that feeling of like, wow, this is the hand of God. Imagine if those drones and UAVs and missiles had gone out. Imagine the funerals that would be happening all over central Israel. Not one of them went. Not one of them. And any missiles that did, and they of course shot many, like every day, they were shooting missiles and UAVs and drones, and somehow knocked down by the Iron Drone, falls to empty land, and then sometimes it does fall where people are, and somehow, basically each time, it fell on a preschool. And for some reason, shortly before that, the preschool teacher took the children out. It fell where my son lives, in Tzfas. It fell in I heard very precise details. My son lives there, and he's explained to me that this is like a senior citizen complex where they all have their own like little apartments. And they're immigrants, they're poor, they're not going anywhere. They don't have relatives to go to. And the one apartment it fell on was an elderly couple that had left, that had gone to visit relatives or friends somewhere in a different city. So it fell on one apartment, and that apartment was empty. And again and again and again, stories like this. It's just, again, each time I hear, it makes me feel like, oh my gosh, thank you, thank you. Look at this protection, look at this care. But then I can forget. And then the next thing happens, and I get excited, and I forget. And I was like, just stop and think. Iran created what they called an axis of resistance. Hamas, Hezbollah, Syria, in Yemen, in Iraq. They had this whole they were taking all the money, billions of dollars of Iranian money, and pouring it into funding these terror groups that all have the same goal: destruction of Israel. Like, we're gonna go like this to Israel because we have Hamas and we have Hezbollah and we have Syria and we have Iraq and we have Yemen. Like, we're gonna literally go like this to destroy Israel, and after Israel, America. That was their reason for existence, their reason for being. At this point, there's no axis of resistance. They're just barely a country. Now, in the beginning, when October 7th first happened, and I wasn't aware of all this, I was just praying for the destruction of Hamas. Then, as I started understanding more, well, it's Hamas, it's Hezbollah, and it's Iran. I'm like, well, this is all coming from Iran. This is all coming from Iran funding. This is all coming from Iran weaponry, Iran know-how. Everything's coming from Iran. But I was like, but how could God destroy a country? Like, it's not a terrorist group, however many thousands of terrorists. It's a country. It seemed impossible. Such a powerful country the whole world is scared of with their nuclear developments. And now it seems so likely that they're just going to fall apart. Maybe just like Syria, they're just going to fall apart. I mean, when the president went down with that helicopter, I'm sure I'm not the only one here that was like, oh, wow, God, you are so creative. Oh, wow, God, you are so amazing. To put things in perspective, the Gulf War was miraculous. It was a miraculous war. 39 Scuds were fired at Israel, and not one person was killed from any of those missiles. This war, hundreds of missiles, of drones, of UAVs have been fired on Israel. Then it was 39. And we couldn't believe it. We couldn't believe the hand of God. We couldn't believe how they came into empty territory. They came near a gas line that was shut off. They destroyed a house, but nobody was there. They destroyed a house and nobody in it got hurt. We couldn't believe 39. Now we are talking literally, nobody's exaggerating here. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of missiles and drones and UAVs have been fired on Israel without basically anything happening besides some property damage. I was there the first time Iran was like, okay, this is it. We're done. We're done with this Jewish impudence, this chutzpah that they keep existing. They keep defying. They keep not getting the message and just quietly dying. We're going to get them. I was there that Saturday night where they shot, it was April 12th, it was Saturday night. They shot over 200 in one night. Remember, the whole Gulf War was 39. They shot over 200, really became close to 400 if you know all the different things they shot at Israel in one night. Not one Jew was harmed. I was there, it was Saturday night. I'm like, I hear the siren. Is this real? What do we do? The next day, I go out on the streets of Jerusalem. It's a bustling city. No one's paying any attention. Irrelevant. Now, what happened? Well, on the physical plane, Israel has the Iron Dome. Israel has something called David's Slingshot. Israel has a third thing that I forget the name. But putting all those three aerial defense systems together, they're not supposed to be 100%. They're not supposed to defend you when the enemy is sending, was about in total 400 different ways of trying to kill you in one night. 400. How did it work 100%? There's so many complicated pieces that have to interconnect. Of course it's not going to work 100%. They would never claim it would work 100%, and it did. It did. It's the hand of God. What happened next? The next big time, right, was in the beginning of October, in the beginning of October, October 1st, again, Iran sent over 200 one time. So I'm saying just between these two times, we have officially in April, it was 200 plus many other things became like 400. In October, it was over 200. That's 600 right there. Plus, 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 plus. 200 ballistic missiles. It was such an embarrassment to Iran because no one got hurt. Because they all got shot down. If they didn't get shot down, they landed in an area that didn't harm any human being. Over 200 and no one got hurt. That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. But it's what happened. And that's just like, how did this happen? This is the hand of God. And then how we responded. October 1st, this was the second time, right? It was in April, and I was there. 200 plus another 200 other smaller things, like a total of 400. Then in October 1st, some 200 ballistic missiles plus. Both times, not one Jew dies from any of these hundreds. And then Israel responds. Israel responded October 26th. They hit 20 locations. They had some new technology that they were able to be undetected by any radars because they went through Syrian airspace, which officially they couldn't. They went into Iranian airspace, undetected. They knocked down Iran's entire aerial defense. They crippled their missile production. Now they're saying it's going to take Iran about a year to be able to start producing missiles again. Again, it was very targeted. It wasn't like we want to kill people. They weren't trying to kill people at all. They were trying to destroy Iran's ability to harm them. And they knew where everything was, and they did 20 precise locations where they struck. They damaged their air defense system. They destroyed their surface-to-air missile batteries. They destroyed their long-range detector radars. They destroyed a nuclear weapons research facility. They destroyed it. And because they destroyed their air defense system, Iran is totally exposed. I was saying, how could we ever destroy this evil? This evil is so vulnerable. Now they're even more vulnerable because Israel destroyed all of Syria's air defense systems. But in October, they already destroyed all of Iran's air defense systems. And not one pilot of ours was shot down. No Jew was hurt in all the damage that was done here. And how did Iran respond? They didn't. They were too scared. Because they knew if they responded, we'd have an excuse to go back and do more. They threatened, they blustered. Lots of airlines stopped flying again to Israel. That's the consequence we've had to pay. Every time somebody threatens, all the airlines say, forget it, too dangerous. They didn't do anything. They did not do anything to respond to October 26th because they were too scared what we could do back. It doesn't make any sense. Again, this is an army of Jews. It's not superpowers, superhumans with capes or, foreign. How are we doing this? And Syria. What Rivka said, that this whole reason why I'm feeling this overwhelming sense of gratitude and we have to just stop and look and say thank you is what happened this week in Syria. Rivka said, with the fall of the Syrian government, now Iran lost that pipeline of supplies to Hezbollah and to Iraq and to every Yemen. They all were going through Syria. But what we did because of that, as Miriam said, we captured without one shot the highest mountain in close proximity to Israel. In the whole Middle East, there's only one mountain higher, but that's far from us. That's deep in Lebanon. Mount Hermon. Now, we already had some of the peaks of Mount Hermon, but the highest peak was not in our hands. In 1974, this is when the Jews got, 1973, it's from the Yom Kippur War, 73, and going into 74, is when we conquered the area of the Golan Heights. And we lost many, many precious Jewish lives from the Yom Kippur War of 73 through 74, conquering this area. Now we got the highest peak, which is of tremendous strategic importance. Because it's so high, the enemies would use it. From this highest peak, you can look and see everything in the area. And we got it without firing a shot. We got it without one Jew's death. And they went over now. They're all over the other side of the Golan. God, you're incredible. What struck me even more than that was what Israel did this past week. Every single day, without any loss of Jewish life, they bombed and bombed and bombed the army bases. Their entire navy got sunk. Their entire air force got destroyed. Their whole aerial defense system is down. And it was like, we've been fighting Hamas since October 7th. Syria is a country. It's not just a country. It is a country with a crazy defense, because Russia and Iran, both for their own self-centered interests of harming other countries, poured billions of dollars into Syria, building up their army, building up their navy, building up their air force, because of their own reasons of how this was going to be effective for them as a springboard for many other areas and whatever they were trying to accomplish. So this wasn't even just like a regular country's army and navy and air force. This was huge. And we destroyed it. We literally, billions of Iranian and Russian dollars went up in smoke. Without any Jewish damage. I was like, every day I just was shocked again. I just kept getting shocked, because most importantly, that our government, that the Israeli Jewish government, that they had the courage and vision to do this. We've spoken before how politicians don't generally do what's good for the defense. Here, the politicians came through. They did just what was good for the defense. That we did it without any harm to ourselves. That nobody in the world stopped us. That very few even vocalized it. I think the majority of the world was very grateful that we were making sure all of this didn't fall into an ISIS or Al-Qaeda, whatever, how we pronounce that, rebel groups. Who knows what they would do with these things. That even the rebels themselves were not really protesting for whatever reason. I don't know their reasoning. I literally watched this interview where I don't know if he's English, some interviewer is asking the head of the rebels, like, well, what do you say about the fact that Israel is bombing and bombing and bombing? And he starts talking about, we have to rebuild, and we have to rebuild, and we have to look inward. And the interviewer was getting really annoyed. That wasn't the response he wanted. He wanted something a little more feisty and aggressive. And he's like, well, but what do you say about what they're doing? And he just started talking again. Yeah, we got to rebuild. We got to rebuild. It's like, he's not even saying, yeah, we're going to go and destroy them. He didn't even say those words. I was like, what's going on? That Israel knew exactly where everything was, how to get to it, how much they were destroying. I was like, I just couldn't believe it. I was like, I'm seeing miracles before my eyes. And I want to just appreciate and thank God for the destruction. I just kept thinking, we've been fighting Hamas for over a year, for 3,000 terrorists. God, you gave us the destruction of an entire country's defense that might become an ISIS state, that might become a jihad state. I hope they don't. But if they do, you made sure they don't have anything left to hurt us with. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. I was, it's just miracles. There's just no way to explain it. It's just miracles. And I'm saying this is why Iran seems so defenseless. In Iran, the people, I don't even know how they get away with this, but just enough of them are just talking about this. Talking about how billions of Iranian dollars were poured into Syria and now went up in smoke. Talking about what is their government doing. Their whole axis of resistance is nothing. It's gone. Hamas, gone. Hezbollah, destroyed. Syria, gone. It's gone. With no way of re-weaponizing them. They lost that control. They lost Syria. It's gone. Their nuclear is going to get destroyed. It's just Iran is defenseless right now, and it's just amazing to say, okay, God, what's going to happen next? I kept thinking of a story. There was a Jewish boy who was studying in West Point, and he was in one class, a lecture, a series of lectures where they're analyzing modern wars. And they're analyzing and explaining and teaching all these West Point cadets. And he's waiting to hear, Israel's War of Independence, the Six-Day War, the Yom Kippur War. Like, how could you not talk about these things? The instructor didn't say a word. And he's like thinking, wow, I mean, okay, I know anti-Semitism, but come on, how could you ignore them? And he was so upset, disturbed, he went over at the end of class and he asked the instructor, well, why didn't you speak of any of Israel's wars? And the instructor said, Israel's wars? Those are all miracles. West Point doesn't teach miracles. And that's what I just kept thinking, imagine all the defense systems and armies of the world watching what's been happening for a year to learn and try to imitate and see what they could utilize for themselves. And they just forget it. No point. No point taking notes. No point trying to imitate. No point. We can't imitate miracles. So Miriam said before, where is this going to? She remembered what I had spoken of quite a while ago, so that was pretty impressive, of the prophecy of Isaiah, of how through the fall of Gaza will lead to Mashiach, will lead to getting the lands east of the Jordan. And Miriam was like, wait, we got Syria. That's east of the Jordan. Like, what's going on? I don't know if this is a fulfillment of that prophecy. But what I do feel very, very, very strongly is that it is the road to redemption. Because what's going to happen by redemption? The entire world is going to recognize God. The entire world is going to serve God. I just can't imagine how people in the world that are looking aren't seeing this is the hand of God. How can we not stop and thank God? How can we just, it'd be like people will look later and they'll look back and you lived through those times. You saw everything, and we'd be like, yeah, I saw, but to be honest, I noticed, I got excited, I got distracted, I noticed, I got excited, I got distracted. No way. How could you have gotten distracted? How could you get distracted when you're seeing miracle after miracle after miracle? Well, other things are going on also in your life, whatever we would say. I was like, no, we're going to talk about this. We're going to thank God. We're going to celebrate. Yes, you could always say, but there's this, but there's this, but there's this. Let's stay focused on what we see, the good, God, revealed, protection, miracles, support of Israel, support of Jewish people and Jewish lives and Jewish land, and say thank you, God, and thank you for being so revealed. The whole world should recognize you. That's Mashiach. The whole world serving God, the whole world recognizing God. So this is a very great road there. When the whole world can say, how did that happen? That's God. The whole world saying that's God, that's the road to Mashiach.